I'm thrilled to welcome Nitin Seth. Nitin is CEO and co-founder at Incedo, the AI and data transformation specialist. He'll tell us what he believes is the key to thriving in the AI age. Nitin, come on out. Thanks.
Good morning. Yeah, we are well and truly in the AI age. And over the last 12 months, I think it's fair to say that the enthusiasm that I saw in maybe the first half of the year, there has been a bit of a reality check that the great progress that we saw in the pilots early on, seems to have stalled a bit, and getting scale, getting ROI has proven to be difficult. So that's what I'm going to talk about, that what does it really take to unlock ROI from AI at scale? And I heard some words from the previous panel that it is perhaps not about an incremental approach. We have to take a big, bold approach. I call it being AI native. So I will unpack what that AI native approach means, and also what is the role of the human in that. Yeah. So we have been talking about or using the words human in the loop, necessary, but perhaps I would submit that is not the answer. And I want to submit a concept of human above the loop. So we'll talk about it. Let's dive right in. So the first really message is that AI age is not a simple continuation of the digital age. Yeah, AI age is not a simple continuation of the digital age. We approach it as it is. Yeah, and the various dimensions of it, how do you drive impact, seem similar. Personalization, automation, innovation, new business models. They appear very similar, but the digital and AI phenomena are quite different. Digital age was fundamentally about taking what was happening, physical, moving it to digital. Whereas AI is about creating something new. The magnitude of the shift on each of the 4 dimensions is rather profound. Personalization, if digital drove segmentation, AI is truly driving hyper-personalization in the segment of 1, and it's an order of magnitude difference in terms of impact on revenues. Automation, I think most of us here would know that story well. Of course, digital drove automation, but it was mostly point automation. Now it is end-to-end, and not just of tasks, but of thought, of decisions, and that's a very different ballgame. Those of us who are in technology, are living it every day, that the fastest growing programming language now is English, that the whole basis of software development is changing very, very fast. If you look at innovation, and one of the industries where we do a lot of work, life sciences, look at the life cycle for drug development from years to months or a few years. It's a dramatic difference. And if you look at business models, and you look at any parameter, how you judge business models, which is whether it is time taken to scale up, or it is the revenue per employee, you're seeing an order of magnitude shift. Okay, so I think that's the first point to really take note of, that AI is not a continuation of the digital age. It may seem like that, but it is quite fundamentally different. However, most enterprises are still approaching AI with an incremental mindset. They are still trying to apply AI to yesterday's business or business model, as opposed to trying to create the one for the future. And I think there has been a lot of research on this, and there is this notion of the value gap between incremental approach and a transformational approach. The biggest shift that the biggest gap that I see today is that the current approaches are very, very much focused on internal efficiency. Are very, very much focused on internal efficiency. 80% of the use cases tend to be more internal in nature, whereas the transformation approach has to be about the customer and has to be about revenues. And that is the shift. That is the shift. Very few are there yet. It is much easier. It is much safer. It is known to work on the existing processes, the existing business, and that is where most enterprises are getting stuck. If you double-click on this incrementalism trap, and that is a key reason why pilots are not scaling. That there are a lot of pilots, very initial enthusiasm, but not enough of them really getting to scale or getting to ROI. There are 7 reasons. The first is the business value alignment, that a lot of pilots, but are they really aligned with the financial goals of an enterprise, and financial goals which are not just on the cost side, but on the revenue side. The second is what I call the workflow invention barrier, that AI today is mostly about bolting AI, creating AI agents or bolting AI on top of existing workflows. It is kind of like almost being used as a more powerful RPA. That's very different from what is possible. Legacy architecture, clearly an issue. In terms of scaling up. Data contextualization, perhaps the biggest is, for me, of these 7 is probably the biggest issue right now, that with AI, we are getting to 50-70% output. And we take very complex human decisions or human processes, and we think we can automate it, but it's not that easy because the gap between 100% and what AI is doing, that is context. That is context, and that is the human role, which we are yet still figuring out, or we are struggling. How do we really factor that into our workflows? And that's where ontologies come in. AI operationalization. There is a lot about how do we operationalize AI. And at the heart of it, what is it about? The output of AI is probabilistic. Versus a deterministic output. And when you have a probabilistic output, there is a lot that needs to change. Governance, we understand that it's becoming more complicated, especially when you have regulated industries like financial services and healthcare. And finally, the talent and org. We'll double-click more on that. So here's my submission, that the only way forward it's not to modernize the business to be AI ready, okay, which is what we are doing today. It is not to modernize the existing business. It is to reimagine the business to be AI native. Yeah? The notion of AI native is very, very important. It is not, you have to take that leap. You have to understand the possibilities with AI, work backwards from that. Because if you just try to bolt on AI on a as-is business, you will only get very limited incremental results. Now let's investigate, what does this reimagining the business or AI native really mean? So to me, this is fundamentally changing the DNA of the enterprise. You see the helix there, that's the DNA. That's my poor attempt at art. So you have to change the DNA of the enterprise, and there are 6 elements to it. The first is the business model. You have to ask the question, what business we are in, and how is AI going to disrupt that value chain? That is the fundamental question you have to ask. And again, I would submit that AI is a growth opportunity. It is not just a cost reduction efficiency opportunity. Until we keep on approaching AI only from a cost reduction perspective, we will only have a very limited view to this. Workflows, you have to start with a with that assumption that, we are going to get to autonomous. Yeah, what does that goal-driven agentic workflow look like? And we work backwards from that, not saying that this is my existing workflow and how do I improve it? Yeah, it's a very fundamentally different approach. Architecture, which is AI first, which is front to back. I think the greatest thing that is happening in the architecture is that the layers, there are multiple layers front to back, and they are really, really coming together. Real time, we are certainly in the age of real-time data, and also the trust and governance issues. Security and trust has to be built into an architecture. It can't be a bolt-on. Deep domain intelligence. I spoke about the value of context. In a world where data is abundant, there is a question that what will drive competitive advantage? And where data is abundant, most majority of that data is public data. My submission is that it is the proprietary data, the proprietary knowledge that becomes super critical. That proprietary knowledge could be just like a pinch of salt in your soup, yeah, but that is really, really the critical aspect, and that is what enterprises need to anchor on. Adaptive enterprise. Adaptive enterprise, that what is going to be the human edge in this AI age? That's also the title of my latest book, which is releasing tomorrow. And it's a big question. I think it is something which we are still discovering. And if we say that we have the answer, we have a perfect answer to that, I think we don't understand the full nature and complexity of the situation. But my submission here, and I'll talk a bit more about it, is that it is not just enough to be human in the loop. We have to think about human above the loop. Yeah, we have to think about human above the loop, and how do we organize the organization around that? And finally, leadership. I think AI age is probably the end of the era of jobs, but it is also the end of the era of managers for sure. Yeah, and leadership is going to be about entrepreneurs and entrepreneurial leadership. And that's a very, very, very different phenomena. So the AI native enterprise, these are what I see as the 6 key tenets of what an AI native enterprise should look like. Now, this point, let's double click on this human aspect, because the AI native enterprise does not mean that it is without humans. That will be a grave generalization, or that will be a mistake. The AI native enterprise is still very much about human at the core. Is still very much about human at the core. But the role of human perhaps changes quite significantly. Yeah? And the future is perhaps not human in the loop. Because the human in the loop today, the role of human is the context. Yeah, is the context. As AI keeps on improving, keeps on becoming more powerful, that human role in the loop will reduce. Okay, so human in the loop is not sustainable. Human plus AI jobs will grow, and then there will come a tipping point, and they will decrease when autonomous really takes off. So that's a short, medium term. That's, of course, a very important reality, but not for the long term. For the medium, long term, it has to be about human above the loop. Okay, human above the loop, which is about setting the direction, which is about creativity, which is about innovation, which is about something that does not exist today. That is fundamental, and that is the future. Now, just to kind of lay this out, okay, I think this is a very important debate which has to be unpacked. There are 3, when we say preparing the organization for the AI age, there is a lot of talk about skilling and reskilling and upskilling. And I would submit that a lot of that is misunderstood or misguided. Yeah? There is a role of AI skills, of course, but how complex is it to figure out how to use Copilot or other Gen AI tools? It is very necessary, but it is not going to be a winning criteria, okay? Now, above that is, of course, about how do you build context. That is a very important thing. And that really comes from domain expertise. Yeah. So what we are going to see is that the domain skills or understanding are going to become more important than just the technical skills. I think it's a very important point. But finally, the value delivery is going to be about creating, nurturing, sparking entrepreneurs. That is where the human above the loop is going to come from, and that's a very, very, very different process. It's a very different process of skilling. When we talk about skilling, reskilling, how you train the organization, enterprise for using AI tools versus how do you train, or how do you make the enterprise ready to be an entrepreneur's nursery are two very, very different steps. Using AI tools is the incremental approach, okay? And preparing the organization for entrepreneurship is the reimagined approach. And look, the reason this debate becomes complicated is because there is a sequence to this. There is a sequence to this. In the immediate term now, perhaps the most immediate benefit from AI is around productivity. Yeah, that is true. It is around productivity, and that is around using the AI tools and the AI skills. But where we are all trying to go is, more significant benefit, which is from the redesigned workflows, from the agentic workflows, and the key bottleneck in the agentic workflows is not the technology. It is the context, and that is where ontologies, really come in. It is the context, that is where the domain knowledge really comes in. But the opportunity for the future, both of these are still human in the loop, but the opportunity for the future is human above the loop, and which is about creating or recreating the purpose of the business. That's a new business. That's something which doesn't exist today. And that is now, how do you fundamentally think about it? So as I mentioned, I'm just releasing my new book, Human Edge in the AI Age, and I proposed this framework called the Possible Framework. And my thesis is that for the AI age, paradoxically, we almost need to go back to the pioneering instincts of the early man. It's not to say that we are going to go back to caves, but the world, the post-industrial revolution world that we have carefully constructed over the last 200, 300 years is perhaps going to get unpacked and recreated over the next 15, 20 years. And it is going to be a brave new world. And it needs that pioneering, adventurous, risk-taking instincts of the early man. It's not that there is anything out of syllabus. It is, what we've always had within us, which we need to double-click on. So the possible, very quickly, P, problem solving. In the age of machines, problem solving still remains very important. But the structured problem solving perhaps has to be combined with wisdom. Openness to change, of course, this is a very, very different world. Spirituality, and people often ask me that why talk about spirituality in the age of, in an AI conversation. Very important. AI is also the age of noise. Is the age of noise and confusion, too many signals. How do you get clarity? You get clarity through a process of going inside yourself, which is what spirituality is. Sports, you can't do it alone. It's very complex. And that's where teamwork and resilience is very important, and that's where sports really come in. Impact, which is, as humans, we are goal-centric, but our goals are also about making a difference. Why are we here? We want to make a difference. It's not just about us. That's how we are different from machines, that we have a bigger purpose. And that is something we'll have to keep on nurturing. Balance. Everything in life and business is about contradictions. The short-term, long-term growth, profitability, man, machine. And in this complex age, we will have to master that duality, master that balance. I spoke about leadership. AI age is also the end of the age of managers. This is the age of, this is about leaders. And finally, the hero of the story, which is entrepreneurship. That is fundamentally, I think, the most important opportunity and imperative for the AI age. So these are 8 core human skills which both individually and as enterprises we need to really, really focus on to get to that human above the loop. AI scales what we know. Humans will create what does not exist. That is going to be the real opportunity. And how do you execute? It seems like a very busy slide. You need both speed and depth. If you don't achieve something in the short term, the future will not happen. So you need to, on each of those dimensions of the AI native enterprise that I spoke about, business model, workflows, architecture, deep domain intelligence, adaptive enterprise, and leadership, you need actions today. You need specific actions today which will have some impact. That's how you will learn. This is not a theory thing. This is about actual, real, experimentation. That is how you will learn. Strategy and execution are not sequential. They have become very iterative. Only as you execute, you learn what is working, what is not working. You connect the dots, and that's your strategy. So it is very important that you execute. But at the same time, the speed to the bigger picture on each of these dimensions is very important. I'll close by saying, carpe diem, seize the moment. I think it is fascinating, the moment of time we are in. I think it's an exceptional moment for us as a human civilization. There is just so much to be done. The world is going to change. It is our responsibility to make sure it is for the better. And again, the AI age is the ultimate entrepreneurial opportunity. If you go with the as-is, you will be maybe quite disappointed. But there is a great opportunity to create. The next 15, 20 years are going to unleash the biggest era of value creation in human history. We have to be a part of that. So that's where I would close. And finally, as I said, my book is releasing soon. We have copies, free copies. So stop by our booth and you can get a copy. I have 3 minutes left. So if there are any questions, I can take maybe 1 or 2 questions. Please use the mic.
Hi. Can you expand a little bit about what you said, the managers should have the entrepreneurial mindset, and that is the next step for them? Because I do work with a lot of engineering managers, and I do agree with what you're saying. How do they balance what they currently do, managing all the people, as well as managing engineering initiatives, and also having the entrepreneurial approach in this new age?
See, that's where the balance or mastering duality really comes in. Of course, in the short term, there is stuff to be managed. It's not going to be self-managed. But at the same time, the whole thesis of this conversation is that what exists and just changing and working on what is today is not going to give you the full kind of value of the AI promise. So it has to be a lot more about creation. It has to be, and creation will be about experimentation. It will be about risk-taking. That's a very, very different mindset. That's an entrepreneur's mindset. Yeah. But to your point, you can't just abandon what is in front of you. So yeah, you have to manage what exists today, but at the same time, focus on creating that new. And I think that is mastering duality. That's why I talk about it, that balance of being able to manage 2 different speeds is going to be very, very important.
Hi, thank you so much for the presentation. I really enjoyed the content. I have a, not sure but a super related question. I saw your framework where you highlight impact, sports, balance. I was just curious how you think creativity, art. Yeah, just want to get your perspectives.
It's creativity and art are very important aspects. Creativity I see as an output. Yeah, creativity I see as an output. So if you think about what really this framework is trying to get to is context, creativity, connection, a human connection. And to me, perhaps spirituality and that process of going within yourself is a way of unlocking creativity. So I completely agree with you. If you think about the framework more deeply, it is geared to exactly the output that you mentioned.
Thank you.
Okay, I'm at time. Thank you very much. And again, Carpe Diem.